Welcome to Mr. Beats-Idiots at Work. This is where you will see your moment compilations. Australia, when the land down under went down underwater in 2024. Australia, the land of kangaroos, Vegemite, and no worries, mate. Until 2024, when Mother Nature decided to throw a tantrum so massive, even the emus probably felt it. This year, Australia didn't just face bushfires, a usual contender. It was the floods that made headlines. And oh boy, when Australia floods, it doesn't just get wet. It goes full Atlantis. What happened in 2024? Picture this. The sunburnt country turned into a soggy mess. A series of record-breaking La Nina weather patterns unleashed torrential rains across Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria, leading to once-in-a-century flooding events. Except, plot twist, this was the third time in the last decade they've had once-in-a-century floods. Rainfall totals. Some areas received 1,000 millimeters, 39 inches, in just 2 days. More water than Sydney sees in an entire year. Forget umbrellas. People needed jet skis just to get to work. Major rivers overflowed. The Murray-Darling Basin, which is supposed to sustain Australian agriculture, decided to sustain a new inland sea instead. Cities submerged. Towns like Lismore saw floodwaters reaching 14 meters, 46 feet. So high that people were literally climbing onto rooftops to escape. The numbers, drenched in devastation. Here's the damage report in numbers because we know you love stats. Economic losses, over $20 billion in damages, making this one of the costliest flood seasons in Australian history. Lives lost. Sadly, 98 people didn't make it out, while thousands were stranded for days. Agriculture wipeout. Crops worth $4 billion were destroyed, including wheat, sugarcane, and fruits. Livestock weren't spared either. Cows became reluctant swimmers. How did Aussies react? Australians are famously chill, but when the floods hit, they pulled out all the stops. Bunnings boaters. People literally turned hardware store trolleys into boats. One guy was seen paddling his way to safety in a wheelie bin. Conic. Beer runs via canoe. In the flood-stricken town of Gympie, locals used canoes to retrieve the essentials. Beer and snacks. Priorities, people. Community spirit. Aussies are nothing if not helpful. Volunteer groups like the SES, State Emergency Service, worked tirelessly, while neighbors helped each other with sandbags, hot meals, and the occasional koala rescue. Why is Australia always in trouble? Geographically, Australia is like that one kid in school who always attracts drama. La Nina strikes again. The Pacific Ocean's colder phase caused wetter conditions across the eastern half of the country. Low-lying areas. Towns like Brisbane and Lismore are built along rivers, making them natural flood magnets. Climate change. Warmer oceans lead to more intense rainfall. Add poor urban planning, and you've got a recipe for soggy disaster. What about 2025? Here's the thing. La Nina has eased, but El Niño might take over, which could mean the complete opposite: searing droughts and bushfires. Australia's weather is basically a reality TV show, and it seems like the scriptwriters are drunk. Experts predict that 2025 could see increased drought risk. After flooding comes extreme dryness, which could devastate crops yet again. Bushfire season. All that rain from 2024 led to lush vegetation, which could become fuel for fires if it dries out. Talk about a vicious cycle. How can Australia fight back? The land down under needs a new playbook to handle these extremes. Flood-proof infrastructure. Build homes and businesses on stilts. If Venice can float, why not Brisbane? Better drainage systems. Invest in underground water channels and reservoirs to handle overflow. Reforestation. Plant more trees to absorb excess water. Bonus, koalas will thank you. Community preparedness. Equip towns with emergency boats, life vests, and, let's be honest, waterproof barbecue kits. Global climate action. Australia can't fix this alone. The world needs to get its act together to curb greenhouse gas emissions. Final thoughts. Surfboards or sandbags? Australia in 2024 was a wild ride. But if there's one thing Aussies know how to do, it's adapt. They'll laugh, they'll rebuild, and they'll probably paddle their way through the next disaster with a beer in hand. Here's hoping 2025 gives them a break, or at least a heads up before the next plot twist. Turkey-Syria border earthquakes that shook the world in 2024. Next on our list is the Turkey-Syria border, a region that faced one of the deadliest and most devastating disasters of 2024. Already vulnerable due to ongoing conflicts and fragile infrastructure, the area was hit by a series of earthquakes that left both nations reeling. The disaster. What happened? The earthquake swarm. In early February 2024, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck near Gaziantep, Turkey, just north of the Syrian border. Within hours, a series of powerful aftershocks, including a 7.5 magnitude tremor, compounded the devastation. Epicenter, near Gaziantep, a bustling city home to over 2 million people. Impact zones, southeastern Turkey and northwestern Syria, including cities like Kahramanmaraş, Aleppo, and Idlib. Reach, shocks were felt as far as Lebanon, Israel, and Iraq. The damage in numbers. Lives lost. Over 70,000 deaths across Turkey and Syria combined, with tens of thousands more injured. This was one of the deadliest earthquakes in recent history. Displacement, more than 1.5 million people were left homeless. Economic costs. Turkey faced damages exceeding $34 billion, while Syria, already crippled by civil war, incurred losses of $5 billion. Infrastructure collapse. Entire neighborhoods were flattened, with ancient landmarks and hospitals reduced to rubble. Why was it so devastating? Geological setup. The earthquake occurred along the East Anatolian Fault, a tectonic boundary where the Arabian and Anatolian plates grind against each other. This fault has a history of producing catastrophic quakes. Vulnerable infrastructure. Many buildings, especially in Syria, were not earthquake-resistant. Decades of conflict and lack of maintenance left structures fragile and prone to collapse. Harsh winter conditions. Freezing temperatures hampered rescue efforts, leaving survivors exposed to the cold while waiting for aid. Political and humanitarian crises. In Syria, ongoing civil war and international sanctions made it nearly impossible to coordinate large-scale relief efforts. The human side, stories of resilience. Despite the overwhelming destruction, countless stories emerged that showcased the resilience of the people. A miracle baby. In Aleppo, rescuers found a newborn baby alive in the rubble, still connected to her deceased mother by the umbilical cord. She was named Amal, meaning hope. Global solidarity. Countries worldwide sent aid, from rescue teams to donations of food, medicine, and shelter supplies. Even rival nations worked together, with Greece and Turkey sharing resources during the crisis. What's next for Turkey and Syria? 2025 predictions. Reconstruction challenges. Turkey will face a lengthy rebuilding process, especially in its affected provinces. Syria, already ravaged by war, may struggle even more without significant international support. Increased seismic activity. Seismologists warn that the region remains at risk of further quakes, potentially affecting areas still recovering. Economic repercussions. With major cities and industries damaged, Turkey's economy could take years to stabilize, while Syria's humanitarian crisis may deepen. Solutions and recommendations. Earthquake-resistant infrastructure. Invest in building codes and retrofitting to minimize future damage. Cross-border collaboration. Establish joint relief programs between Turkey and Syria, leveraging international aid. Early warning systems. Implement seismic monitoring networks to give residents more time to evacuate. Community preparedness. Educate residents on earthquake safety measures, such as evacuation drills and emergency supply kits. Final thoughts, rebuilding amid ruins. The 2024 earthquakes in Turkey and Syria were a stark reminder of how natural disasters can amplify human suffering, especially in regions already burdened by war and poverty. Yet, amid the rubble, the resilience of the human spirit shone through. As these nations rebuild, the world must step up to support them, not just with donations, but with long-term strategies to ensure such tragedies don't claim as many lives again. Bangladesh. battling monsoon floods in 2024. Let's turn our focus to Bangladesh, a nation that seems to be on Mother Nature's permanent disaster playlist. Known for its vibrant culture and resilience, Bangladesh is also infamous for being one of the world's most flood-prone countries. In 2024, monsoon floods wreaked havoc yet again, affecting millions and reshaping the lives of its people. What happened in 2024? Monsoon chaos. The monsoon season in Bangladesh, spanning June to September, was exceptionally severe this year, fueled by intense rainfalls and overflowing rivers. Rainfall totals, over 1,200 millimeters, 47 inches, fell in Dhaka over 3 months, with some regions seeing nearly double their annual average. River overflow. The Jamuna, Padma, and Meghna rivers burst their banks, inundating 1/3 of the country. Cyclone Sidr 2.0, a tropical cyclone, unofficially dubbed Sidr 2.0, hit coastal regions, amplifying the disaster with storm surges. The damage in numbers. Lives lost. Over 1,500 deaths were reported, with most caused by drowning, electrocution, and collapsing structures. Displacement. 4. 5 million people were forced to evacuate, taking refuge in overcrowded shelters or on elevated highways. Agriculture. Fields of rice, jute, and vegetables worth $2. 7 billion were destroyed, crippling local farmers. Infrastructure. Over 12,000 kilometers of roads were washed away, and 400 schools were damaged, disrupting education for thousands. Why Bangladesh faces such severe flooding. Geographical vulnerability. Bangladesh lies in the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna Delta, the world's largest river delta. This unique geography makes it a hotspot for floods. Rising sea levels. Climate change is causing sea levels to rise, which worsens coastal flooding during storms. Population density. With over 1,265 people per square kilometer, even small floods have a disproportionately large human impact. Deforestation and urbanization. Rapid development and deforestation have reduced the natural barriers that once mitigated flooding. How Bangladesh coped. 1. Heroic evacuations. Officials and NGOs worked tirelessly to relocate millions to higher ground, though limited resources made the process challenging. 2. Floating farms. Some farmers adopted floating agricultural techniques, growing crops on rafts made of water hyacinth. A brilliant, low-tech solution to keep livelihoods afloat, literally. 3. International aid. Countries and organizations like the UN, Red Cross, and World Bank provided food, medical supplies, and financial aid, though distribution was uneven due to the disaster scale. 2025 predictions. Bangladesh's challenges are far from over. Intensifying monsoons. With climate change exacerbating rainfall patterns, experts predict that 2025 could bring even more extreme weather events. Economic struggles. The agricultural sector may face long-term setbacks, affecting exports and food security. Increased cyclone activity. Warmer ocean temperatures are likely to fuel stronger tropical storms. Solutions. Fighting the floods. Infrastructure upgrades. Invest in embankments, flood barriers, and early warning systems. Community resilience. Expand flood shelters and train communities in disaster preparedness. Nature-based solutions. Restore mangroves along coastal areas to act as natural storm buffers. Global climate action. Bangladesh contributes only a fraction of global emissions but bears the brunt of the impacts. International cooperation is essential to address the root causes of climate change. Final thoughts. A nation of fighters. Bangladesh may be battered by floods year after year, but its people are nothing if not resilient. From building floating farms to finding refuge on rooftops, they find ways to adapt and survive. The floods of 2024 were devastating, but the spirit of the Bangladeshi people remains unbroken. Here's hoping 2025 brings more solutions and fewer storms. Libya, flash flood catastrophe in 2024. Let's dive into the tragedy that unfolded in Libya, where a devastating flash flood swept through the northeastern part of the country in September 2024, leaving communities in shock and mourning. This disaster, exacerbated by infrastructure failures and unrelenting rainfall, became one homes, cars, and people. The sudden and powerful floodwaters destroyed 25% of Derna, leaving the city unrecognizable. The aftermath in numbers: lives lost, over 20,000 fatalities with thousands still missing. Displacement: more than 100,000 residents were forced to flee, many now homeless. Economic impact: damages are estimated at $10 billion, with most of Derna's infrastructure obliterated. Environmental consequences: polluted floodwaters have contaminated the area, raising concerns about disease outbreaks. Why was it so severe? Climate change amplification: warmer sea temperatures in the Mediterranean intensified Storm Daniel, leading to unprecedented rainfall levels. Aging infrastructure: both dams were built in the 1970s and had not been maintained in decades. Reports indicate that engineers warned of their potential collapse as early as 2011. Geography: Derna is situated in a valley, making it particularly vulnerable to flash flooding. The geography funneled the floodwaters directly into the heart of the city. Political instability: ongoing conflict and a lack of unified governance severely hampered Libya's ability to prepare for and respond to natural disasters. The human stories: amid the tragedy, there were acts of heroism and resilience. The teacher's shield: a local teacher used her body to shield her students, saving many but tragically losing her life. Global solidarity: rescue teams from Turkey, Italy, and Egypt joined Libyan responders in searching for survivors, while donations poured in from around the world. 2025 predictions for Libya: increased flood risks. Climate experts warn that warming oceans may lead to stronger Mediterranean storms, making similar disasters more likely. Slow recovery: rebuilding efforts will be hampered by Libya's political divisions, with some areas potentially remaining uninhabitable for years. Water scarcity: the destruction of water systems could lead to prolonged crises in the affected regions, affecting both agriculture and daily life. What can be done? Rebuild infrastructure. Construct modern, resilient dams and flood barriers capable of withstanding extreme weather events. Unified emergency plans: Libya must establish coordinated disaster response mechanisms despite its political fragmentation. Early warning systems: implement advanced weather monitoring systems and community alert programs to give residents time to evacuate. Global aid: continued international support will be critical for rebuilding and addressing public health challenges. Final thoughts: a nation in mourning, yet resolute. Libya's 2024 flood is a heartbreaking reminder of the devastation that climate change and neglect can bring. However, the resilience of its people and the solidarity shown by the global community offer a glimmer of hope. Moving forward, Libya must prioritize disaster preparedness and infrastructural modernization to protect its citizens from future calamities. In 2024, China faced a monumental flooding event along the Yangtze River Basin, one of the country's most critical and populous regions. The combination of relentless rainfall, swollen rivers, and inadequate drainage systems created a perfect storm that impacted millions. Months. Urban flooding. Cities like Wuhan and Chongqing were submerged as drainage systems buckled under the deluge. The Yangtze River crisis. The Yangtze River, China's longest river, overflowed in multiple sections, affecting its major tributaries like the Han River and Jialing River. Three Gorges Dam managed to prevent complete disaster by holding back significant floodwater, but downstream regions still suffered severe inundation. Impact in numbers, casualties and displacement, deaths. Over 3,200 lives were lost due to floods, landslides, and structural collapses. Displaced. Approximately 18 million people were forced to evacuate their homes. Economic costs. Damages were estimated at $40 billion, with farmlands, factories, and infrastructure bearing the brunt of the destruction. Agricultural losses included the devastation of 10 million acres of rice and vegetable fields. Infrastructure. Over 15,000 kilometers, 9,320 miles, of roads and highways were destroyed or damaged. Urban areas experienced significant power outages, water contamination, and transportation paralysis. Why was the flood so severe? Climate change. Warmer atmospheric temperatures led to intensified monsoon rains, exacerbating seasonal flooding. Urban expansion. Rapid urbanization along the Yangtze Basin has reduced wetlands and natural flood buffers, amplifying flood risks. Aging infrastructure. Despite advancements like the Three Gorges Dam, older flood defenses in rural areas failed to withstand the deluge. The human stories. A town's resilience. In a small village outside Wuhan, locals built temporary levees with sandbags and furniture to protect their homes, saving many from destruction. Heroic rescues. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, mobilized thousands of troops to rescue stranded residents, often using helicopters and boats to navigate the submerged streets. What's next for China? 2025 predictions. Increased risk. Experts predict another intense monsoon season in 2025 due to ongoing climatic changes. Economic strain. The agricultural sector will take years to recover, potentially affecting global food prices, given China's significant role in the market. Urban policy overhaul. Cities like Wuhan are already planning to expand their sponge city initiatives, designing urban areas to better absorb excess water. Solutions for future floods. Enhancing infrastructure. Upgrade flood barriers, levees, and drainage systems, particularly in rural and semi-urban areas. Reforestation and wetlands. Restore wetlands along the Yangtze River to act as natural flood buffers. Early warning systems. Expand real-time monitoring systems and public education campaigns to improve evacuation efforts. Global cooperation. Share data and strategies with other flood-prone nations to adopt innovative solutions like floating farms and amphibious housing. Final thoughts. The floods of 2024 were a stark reminder of the risks posed by climate change, urbanization, and aging infrastructure. However, China's swift response and its ability to manage such a massive-scale disaster highlight the resilience of its people and systems. With lessons learned, there's hope for better preparedness and adaptation in 2025 and beyond. Europe experienced some devastating floods in 2024, but none were as severe or tragic as those in Thessaly, Greece. This region, known for its lush plains and rich history, found itself drowning under the unprecedented wrath of Storm Elias.
Descriptive like an adjective, I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past. And the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior, you know I'll always be a bit superior. Get off of me.
The river swelled beyond its capacity, inundating towns and villages across the Thessalian plains. Urban submergence. Cities like Larissa and Karditsa faced catastrophic flooding, with water levels reaching 2 meters, 5 feet, in some neighborhoods. Unexpected triggers. The already saturated ground from Storm Daniel earlier in the summer exacerbated the flooding, as there was no capacity left for water absorption. Damage and impact in numbers. Human toll. Lives lost. At least 240 people perished. with many swept away by flash floods or trapped in their homes. Displacement. Over 30,000 residents were forced to evacuate, some using rafts or boats to escape the rising waters. Economic damage. Agricultural losses in Thessaly, Greece's primary food-producing region, exceeded €5 billion, with entire crops of wheat, cotton, and corn wiped out. Thousands of livestock were lost, including 10,000 sheep, devastating the local dairy and meat industries. Infrastructure devastation. Over 1,200 kilometers, 745 miles, of roads were destroyed or submerged. Bridges collapsed, cutting off access to remote villages and leaving entire communities isolated. Why was the flood so severe? Climate change effects. Mediterranean cyclones, like Elias, are becoming more frequent and intense due to warming sea temperatures, which fuel heavier rainfall. Urban and agricultural mismanagement. Extensive irrigation networks and urban sprawl reduced natural floodplain areas, leaving water with nowhere to flow. Delayed infrastructure investments. Thessaly lacked modern flood barriers and drainage systems, which could have mitigated the damage. Stories of survival. Town united. In a village near Karditsa, locals formed a human chain to rescue stranded neighbors. Using everything from boats to makeshift rafts, they worked tirelessly for 3 days until official rescue teams arrived. Heroic efforts. Greek firefighters, soldiers, and volunteers braved the rising waters to airlift stranded families and deliver essential supplies to isolated areas. Looking ahead to 2025. Continued risk. Scientists predict that the Mediterranean will see more extreme weather events, making regions like Thessaly vulnerable to future storms. Economic challenges. Rebuilding infrastructure and revitalizing agriculture will take years, with ripple effects likely felt throughout Greece's economy. Policy reforms. The Greek government is expected to invest heavily in flood defenses, including new dams, levees, and riverbank reinforcements. Solutions for a resilient future. Restoring natural floodplains. Reintroducing wetlands and natural buffers could help absorb excess rainfall. Building stronger defenses. Modernizing infrastructure, such as drainage systems and flood walls, is essential to protecting cities and towns. Early warning systems. Implementing better monitoring tools and public alert systems can save lives by giving residents time to prepare or evacuate. Regional collaboration. Greece should work with other Mediterranean countries to share strategies and resources for tackling the growing threat of climate-driven disasters. Final thoughts. Resilience amid ruin. The floods in Thessaly were a sobering reminder of how vulnerable even historically rich and culturally vibrant regions can be to the forces of nature. But the resilience shown by the Greek people in their darkest hour serves as a beacon of hope. As Thessaly rebuilds, its story is a testament to the power of community and the urgent need for climate action. Mozambique. Cyclone Freddy's record-setting floods in 2024. In 2024, Mozambique found itself at the mercy of one of the most devastating natural disasters in its history, Cyclone Freddy, making Cyclone Freddy broke records as the longest-lasting tropical cyclone ever, lingering for over 37 days. Rainfall extremes. Some regions in Mozambique received over 900 millimeters, 35 inches, of rain in just a few weeks, equivalent to more than half a year's precipitation. Double landfall. Freddy struck Mozambique twice, first near Vilanculos and then near Quelimane, compounding the destruction. Impact in numbers.
Lives and livelihood.
Human cost. Deaths. Over 1,800 people lost their lives, with many swept away by floods or buried under landslides. Displacement. More than 2. 5 million people were forced to leave their homes, seeking refuge in overcrowded shelters. Injuries and missing, thousands remain unaccounted for, as many areas were cut off by floodwaters. Economic toll. Mozambique suffered $5 billion in damages, with agriculture, infrastructure, and housing bearing the brunt. Over 700,000 hectares, 1.7 million acres of farmland were submerged, destroying staple crops like maize and cassava. Infrastructure collapse. Roads, bridges, and railways were wiped out, with major highways rendered impassable. Electricity and water supplies were disrupted for weeks, worsening the humanitarian crisis. Why was Freddy so devastating? Climate change amplification. Rising sea surface temperatures in the Indian Ocean fueled Freddy's intensity, giving it more moisture to dump as rain. Poor infrastructure. Mozambique's flood defenses, including dams and levees, were inadequate to handle such extreme rainfall. Recurrent vulnerability. Mozambique frequently experiences cyclones, leaving the population in a cycle of rebuilding without time for resilience planning. Human stories from the floods. The village that floated. In Sofala province, residents used overturned boats and makeshift rafts to survive for weeks. Families tied themselves together with ropes to avoid being swept away by the currents. The rescuers. Volunteers and international aid groups deployed helicopters and boats to rescue thousands stranded on rooftops and treetops, often risking their own lives in the process. Looking ahead, predictions for 2025. Heightened cyclone activity. Scientists warn that warming oceans could increase the frequency of intense cyclones in the Indian Ocean region. Slow recovery. With many communities still reeling from Cyclone Freddy, rebuilding efforts will be slow, especially in rural areas. Food insecurity. The destruction of farmland will likely lead to a food crisis, with millions relying on international aid well into 2025. Solutions for future resilience. Improved flood defenses. Build stronger levees, dams, and drainage systems to better manage excessive rainfall. Relocation of vulnerable communities. Move populations in flood-prone areas to safer zones, paired with sustainable urban planning. Climate adaptation strategies. Invest in climate-resilient crops and early warning systems for storms. International aid and cooperation. Continued support from global organizations like the UN and Red Cross is critical for Mozambique's recovery and preparedness. Final thoughts. The fight for survival. Mozambique's encounter with Cyclone Freddy highlighted both the devastating impacts of climate change and the indomitable spirit of its people. As the country rebuilds, it faces a dual challenge: addressing the immediate needs of its population while preparing for an uncertain and stormier future. Despite the hardships, Mozambique remains resilient, a beacon of hope in the face of natural adversity.